we got coming up, which is Viper versus Bunnyhoppor, who are sitting at 7-4 and 6-5 respectively. This is a must-win scenario for the two of these if they want to advance to playoffs.
It absolutely is, yeah. And Viper mentioned as such when we interviewed him, he said that this was potentially the biggest game of his season. Bunnyhoppor, for his part, we actually mentioned yesterday how it was a little weird that he was on Rogue because I'd seen him on stream talking about how he felt that Beast Hunter was the only deck that he was comfortable with. But we'll get to that in a little moment because I think we're going to look at Viper first, who is playing a mostly standard primary version of Cyclone Mage, but beyond that, his secondary and tertiary both have a little bit of extra spice in it, but we are not likely, I believe, to be seeing those during this series, as the primary looks like the most effective way to be dealing with Rogue.
Yeah, just pretty straightforward here from Viper is bringing the Luna's Pocket Galaxy. His side decks are, I think, really where his creativity shined this week. But other than that, pretty straightforward, standard stuff that we're seeing from him in the Cyclone Mage. And so as we take a look at Bunnyhoppor's deck and see exactly what we're talking about, he does have a little bit of spice that he'll be going to in the secondary deck there, but just pretty much the good old H1O Rogue, as we've come to know it this week. It has removed one of the copies of Sea Giant that has traditionally been found in this deck with the double Sea Giant, double Shark for that oceanic theme that's in there. But overall, I have to give this advantage over to Bunnyhoppor because I think this is a deck that can do a number on Mage.
It very much is, but then to temper that further and just to round off the anecdote from earlier, Orange was actually kind enough to approach us on Twitter and say that Bunnyhoppor just kind of took this deck from Orange's practice group because they were so sold on it being so powerful, took this lineup, and that might go some way to explain why Bunnyhoppor, you know, despite not being fully comfortable in playing Rogue in his own mind, ended up going with it because he was just convinced by the passion and the commitment of other people that this was the deck to bring. And I think that's also worth bringing up because one of Bunnyhoppor's most common practice partners is Viper himself. So, of course, this week, Bunnyhoppor will have been down one of his regular practice partners because they wouldn't have wanted to practice against each other when they have the match coming up. So that means Bunnyhoppor does have to go to outside sources and to take more on board from other people because his normal practice strategy was so heavily disrupted.
If I recall correctly, I believe they've talked a bit about it where they have not put too much stock into the fact that they were playing each other in the first time.
Is that the case? Interesting.
That's if I recall correctly. Now, if I recalled that correctly, I think this series would be the exception to that because it means so much.
Yes.
It's a must-win for both of them. They know that there's something large at stake, and they just went, you know what? Just got to do this time. I'll be curious to ask. I should have asked Viper about that yesterday, and I didn't.
Well,
and now I feel foolish.
Either way around, we'll be able to ask the victor about it today.
Yay! All my mistakes are compensated for.
Woo! Everything just works out. Everything's coming up Millhouse.
S-U-C-C-E-E-S. That's the way you spell success.
Well, T-R-A-D-E-R. That's how you spell trader. And Viper very much showed us yesterday that he knows his way around a trade or two, and he is certainly not the one playing the aggressor in this matchup. But with Bunnyhoppor's hand, Viper right now has the ability to curve out more aggressively than the Rogue based on these opening hands.
Yeah, I think that Blink Fox pickup is going to be pretty crucial to this game for Bunnyhoppor. Not only activating the Vendetta, but just also have something to play. You know, lacking minions early on versus Mage is one of the toughest things that you can run across. And so drawing Backstab and Leroy early on, these are pretty unideal draws against Mage. You know, the Backstab's good if they play Sorcerer's Apprentice early. That's about it.
No hesitation from Viper. Historically, one of the slowest players in the game. Both of these players are, in fact. Both of these players are enormously successful Hearthstone Championship Tour players. So previously, when they would clash in the Hearthstone Championship Tour, you were in for a marathon because these players are both incredibly considered, use the full length of time available to them on most turns. But Viper there says, nope, absolutely zero consideration to dropping this Sorcerer's Apprentice. Ping your face.
I think it's a show of respect. It's like, you know what? I know what I'm going to do. I know what you're going to do. I know that you probably know what you're going to do. Let's just get on with it.
So what you're saying is the Bunnyhoppor, by continuing to rope every turn, is showing zero respect to Viper.
That's not, it does not have the inverse implications of it.
It absolutely does. Bunnyhoppor hates Viper.
That's your claim.
Admirable. 2019.
No, that was you said that. I'm saying I didn't say that.
Okay.
Is this how politics works?
Does politics work?
Not effectively. At least I don't think so, but you get what I'm saying.
Moving swiftly on and back to the subject of Hearthstone.
Snip Snap!
There we go.
Easily one of my favorite cards of this whole metagame.
It is really great. It also has a wonderful little golden animation.
It's just, well, I crafted a normal one.
Yes, that's true. But I just want to point out that things with very subtle golden animations are my favorite. Like the Oasis snap jaw, just little snapping jaw that it has going on. Maybe I just like things snapping. That's what we're learning.
Oh, no wonder you like me so much.
You do snap regularly.
What are you talking about? I never snap!
You get it? He did snap. But
I was really trying to find a way to make a Ken Shamrock reference that I know only you and I and one other person would get.
Oh.
That was my favorite. He was actually like the first wrestler that I remember that was like a cartoon character, where it's just suddenly Ken Shamrock had snapped and he just became super strong. Like everyone has their special moves. Ken Shamrock's special move was he just got really strong, and he was already really strong.
Ken Shamrock was massively underutilized. He had a good look. He was actually a badass because of his mixed martial arts background, like one of the biggest names in history from that. And he never really got above like the intercontinental title scene. Very weird to me. Hearthstone!
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's finally got like the decision-making point in front of him where I'm sure for Bunnyhoppor, he was looking at it and going, oh, get a minion in play. And he's going, oh, wait a minute, Spear of the Shark gets me extra cards. It gets to deal extra damage. Like, to me, the Spirit of the Shark here is close to equivalent in development, if not more, than the Life Drinker is, simply for the sake that Life Drinker's damage will be made up for on the missed attack by the Battle Cry effect. Right. It duplicates. And so the conclusion on that is I probably want to see what tools I have offered to me from Blink Fox. That's a better point of development. You don't really want to be playing Blink Fox to activate Vendetta after the Mountain Giant's been played. You want to do it before and then get in some attacks. Proactive.
I wonder.
And out of Bunnyhoppor's babbling fox, he's found himself a randomly generated polymorph in a pretty useful situation to pick up a polymorph. When one of your go-to techs in Rogue to beat Mage is Walk the Plank, that should go to show you how good a random polymorph from a Blink Fox could end up being.
Well, I want to pay 4 mana to destroy an undamaged minion.
Yeah.
So what if I paid 4 mana to just turn it into a 1/1?
And it doesn't even have to be undamaged. Have you ever made the ping your own giant play?
I've seen it, and then I went, and then probably forgot about it every time after that. I mean, you know me in 1 damage. That's like bread and butter.
If you tried to suggest that play to Admirable, he would probably try to argue that he valued have 1 damage to face more than having a mountain giant.
Ridiculous.
I guarantee you would hear the words, even if he showed me that he had walked the plank, I would still ping face
Hey, that's just completely neutralizing a card, which is my actual favorite.
You would absolutely say that, I promise you.
I wonder.
Hearthstone!
No, he knows I'm right.
I imagine aiming the ping at my face and my opponent then shows me the walk the plank, and I'm like, I really don't want to back down now.
So many.
I might spite do it, I guess. Oh yeah, you probably have me on the spite point.
Yeah.
Dang it!
And you are very good at justifying things that even you don't believe in out of spite.
Choose soon.
Bunnyhoppor, I think, trying to do the math on a lethal setup. What's the quickest it can be? What draws influence that? And how do I most play around everything? That I'm pretty curious about. Why not the backstab?
It's a great question.
I kind of like this snip snap hammering away for 2 damage at a time.
Well, it still gets to hammer away for 2 damage unless Viper wants to start pinging off 1/1s, which he can't really afford to do in the matchup.
See, I wonder if the consideration is actually like future Sea Giant turns, where you want to split up the snip snap now so that you can reduce the number of minions perhaps the split attack makes a difference when your opponent has Mountain Giant Conjurers calling?
Simpler explanation, maybe in anticipation of just Giant Conjurers calling in the near future, he wants to be able to backstab Vendetta one Giant, and then have Polymorph for the other, and then just with a couple of minions on board, he can completely neutralize the threat.
Yeah, splitting the attack damage up and then having it that way, right?
Right.
And so the backstab helps you do that?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I wonder.
It's just a theory. If he ends up backstab Vendettering, then it seems to be paying that theory out. Alright, 2 damage pops in, Polymorph, 6 face. Like, in the face of Giant Conjurers calling, keeping hold of that backstab allowed him to deal with this situation much more efficiently.
Indeed, that was the consideration. Very, very smartly spotted, too. That would have cost him a 3-3 otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. Like, that's a little thing that made such a huge impact in the game.
Someday I'll be just like you.
Oh, looks like Viper says, well, plan A has failed. Let's look towards plan B and see if we can get this Mana Cyclone to dig ourselves out of this. Might even be... Okay, the bananas are happening. There was the opportunity to double freeze there and just make a board full of 2-drops, right? With the Khadgar Conjurers calling.
So
Kind of interesting.
there was also the option to Frost Nova first so that the Ray of Frost dealt damage. There's also the option for double Mana Cyclone. I think his head was on play 2 Mana Cyclones this turn.
Did he not just get that Frost Nova? Did he always have it? Wasn't it from the Mana?
I think he drew it this turn, didn't he?
Okay, maybe.
Maybe it... Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind now, because he drew Ray of Frost, Counterspell Fireball after casting Ray of Frost, Banana.
Okay. Then yeah, he must have had it. I mean, I think this turn puts him in a pretty decent position, right?
I think from his perspective, absolutely.
And I think when you have the cards Frost Nova, Khadgar, and Conjurer's Calling in your hand, you're definitely justified in wanting to hold to play those cards together in some kind of combination for a massive swing turn later on in the game.
It is the Mage MO. Get to swing turns.
Yep.
You got a lot of ways to do them. Starting to see the struggles of Bunnyhoppor's hand here a bit.
This guy's toast.
Yeah, but he's only really Waggle Pick or Shadow Step or with the Spirit of the Sharks, even a Life Drinker away from that Leroy being able to seal out the game.
Indeed. 2 Waggle Picks, 2 Shadow Steps in the deck, a second copy of Life Drinker, and then also just Evil Miscreant and Hench Clan Burglar. You know, that to me are the 2 of the main considerations for holding the backstab in this position.
Again, yeah, Bunnyhoppor just refusing to backstab a small minion.
Oh my. That is a huge draw. Elemental Evocation, Mountain Giant, Khadgar, Conjurer's Calling.
Yep.
That's game.
Sign me up. Well... yeah.
It might not be game, but this is real. This is what the game hinges on right here. If Bunnyhoppor can ever get past this.
He wants some of these to have the number 7 on them, though, and they do not.
Okay, so that's the 25% outcome where Viper can be in trouble to exactly super aggression from Bunnyhoppor's side.
Yes, there are now lethal outs this turn for Bunnyhoppor, based on Viper not knowing what cards are in there. But Blink Fox not being lethal is the next best thing. If he was able to pick up there, for example, a Frost Nova, then he can set up lethal for himself on the following turn. Kona Cold potentially would have done the same thing.
Oh,
Ray
yeah.
of Frost, even, would be enough to take damage off the board.
Too much pressure.
From nothing.
4, 5, 6. Another Vendetta would have kept him alive, is that right?
16, 24, 26, yeah, to what he can see it would have done, but the Fireball in hand from Viper would have ended it out.
Yeah, I always speak from the perspective of the player seeing it in these
And
outcomes.
I will always clarify.
Good. That's teamwork.
Yeah.
High five.
Woo!
Choose soon.
Actually holding on to that backstab allows him to do the same thing anyway. Leaving only 26 damage on board in minions, plus the ping is 27. But Viper probably thinks there is a very slim chance even himself. And Viper immediately is going to show the fireball here.
Yeah, not aggressive enough early on and doesn't have the proper checks to this. You know, you need to present real aggression to your opponent. And I think that Leroy's Spear of the Shark backstab in your opening hand really hindered that ability from Bunnyhoppor.
Yep, and I think that's, you saw there just a little glimpse of why, you know, perhaps the Khadgar Conjurer's calling was not always the end of the game. That 25% chance that no Grave Horrors come out was crucial. That was the key to everything. But then beyond that, even then, you're looking at very niche outs, which is your opponent has Leroy Shadow Step in their hand right now, or then beyond that, random generation finds them some kind of mage card to then be able to deal with that situation.
Yeah, so slim to none on, I think, both of those instances, but still possibilities, you know. Oftentimes I speak in hyperbole when I talk about who's favored in a matchup.
I love hyperbole.
Or when a game ends. It's when it's massively favored, I say you never lose here. You always win here, and that's probably game. That means someone's got a big lead.
Yeah.
Now, when I say someone's in trub, what that means is something crazy is going to happen, even though they're at a substantial edge, and it's going to turn everything around, and I'm going to look stupid.
That has been the form so far. You've said, well, if I say trub, then they're going to lose the game, and then they immediately win the game. That's how it's gone so far.
And when I say we got to go to a break, it means that we have to take a quick break. So that's what we're going to do, and then we're going to come back with game number 2 of Bunnyhoppor taking on Viper. Viper off to a 1-0 lead. We'll see how their side decks can change things up.
My name is Tom Val, my handle is Viper. My username is just one of those boring stories where it's a 12, 13-year-old kid makes his first WoW account basically. You gotta pick a username, taken. Is this Viper taken? Oh, Viper's possible, nice, okay, whatever. It's a generic name, it's fine. And then I just stick to it. Being Grandmasters means that I'm one of the top 16 players in Europe basically, right? Which is really worth a lot for me because I always want to be the best, I always want to be competitive, I always want to do well. That's just who I am. I always try to be open-minded. I try to test whatever decks I go at. January in 2016 it was, I think. I had almost 3K games in a month, just playing Aggro Shaman and Miracle. I think I've also played an unhealthy amount of J Druid and the Dragon Combo Priest after that. I just love those powerful decks, I guess. Being second at Worlds, it's such a crazy feeling and I'm not sure if I really realize it at this point. Now I'm just looking forward to Grandmasters, I'm looking forward to playing well. I want to play on the big stage, I'm really looking forward to that.
My name is Rafael Pelzer. I go by Bunnyhoppor in Hearthstone. I've always been a competitive kid. There's always a little bit more to the game, right? You get tired of just playing at a certain level and you always just want a little bit more. You hit legend, you hit high legend, you hit rank 1 and you're like, let's go to the next level. Yeah, it means a lot to me to be in the Grandmasters program because it feels really great to be recognized, especially last year was going really well for me. I think what I look forward to the most in Grandmasters is just have this weekly schedule of competition that every week you can iterate your lineup. Every week you have another match against another good player instead of having these dry periods where you don't play any matches, any best of 5s, best of 3s. So my personal goals is firstly do well in Grandmasters and secondly is I'm still trying to find a good job in chemical industry.
Is there some sort of X factor that sets you apart from everyone else?
I mean, I have a doctor, haha.
We are back in our second match of the day with Bunnyhoppor taking on Viper in this one. And that's admirable. And I'm joined by Soddle. And Soddle, Viper's off to a quick lead here, but Bunnyhoppor has a chance to answer back. He's changed his deck up a little bit.
He is indeed. As we mentioned, one of the go-to techs to beat Mage with Rogue is to bring in some Walk the Planks into your deck, as we were referencing that random polymorph that Bunny was able to pick up there. So 2 of those are going into Bunny's deck alongside, on the other side, a bit of extra aggression with the Fairy Dragons, which are minions that cannot be pinged. They cannot be hit with a randomly generated Frostbolt, or a Frostbolt that some players will even choose to include in their Mage deck.
Or a Ray of Frost.
Or a Ray of Frost. All of the options are taken away from the Mage to be able to deny that damage going through. And since the Cyclone Mage is rarely able to drop a minion that doesn't just get cleared out by SI7 or Backstab in the early game, that just frees up that Fairy Dragon to just keep connecting for face every single turn.
Toss in a Betrayal, and you've got some counterplay to Conjurer's Calling. Bada bing, bada boom. You call that a game plan.
Toss in a Betrayal, and then maybe you got a stew going.
What kind of stew is it?
Stew. Stew is a name. S-T-U. There's an E and a W in it, Admirable.
Well, STU, that's stew. That's.
Wait, is it just the other way around in American?
No, I'm just messing with
Okay, you actually had me there for a second.
Yes! All right, I figured it out. Look at Soddle like I'm dumbfounded and then say the thing, and he'll think I'm being serious. We talk a lot about that, actually. Just the difference in words.
Yeah.
Where I remember you were like, y'all call it a sidewalk. Well, you didn't say y'all, but the gist of it was, you said, y'all call it a sidewalk here.
Yeah. You're just very descriptive with the words that you use. Like, sidewalk, it's the bit at the side that you walk on. Whereas we're just like, pavement. Like, what does that even mean? That means nothing to anybody.
It means pavement.
Yeah.
Now, that could be anything. It's ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I expect from British comedy and news shows. Is I hear it and I go, I know what you said, but I'm still not quite sure.
Pretty solid opener for Bunnyhoppor. Does not find that Fairy Dragon that he would have been looking for on his 3-mult. Viper, on the other hand, that is an old school Miracle Rogue looking hand.
This is a couple of cards will drastically change how good or bad this hand is. Draw.
Time runs out on me.
I've been becoming a bigger and bigger fan of turn 1 Magic Trick. However, when I have 2 evocations in my hand, it definitely makes me wonder a bit.
Yeah, I think it's a little weirder on ladder when you just queue into the class and you don't necessarily know what the makeup of their deck is. Like if there's multiple archetypes available, which type of deck they're playing. Like when you have full knowledge, full open deck lists, like yes, your choice of Magic Trick might vary later on in the game when you have to react to a specific situation, but you have a generally good idea of what kind of cards you're looking for. And on top of that, you have 1 mana to spend, so you might as well spend 1 mana because that just makes you more efficient later on in the game. And to that note, Viper picks up an Arcane Missiles, which is one of the few cards in Mage that give him a chance of answering a Fairy Dragon if it comes down.
Right, and so the second Magic Trick, why wouldn't you use it? Well, the answer is turn 3 is going to be Arcane Intellect. And so he doesn't necessarily know what he wants because picking up different tools from your deck is going to change what you want off the Magic Trick. So I really like this sequencing. Find something that's utility and then save on the other one and see what you're going to do.
Also, he had 2 mana available, which he spent on pinging his opponent instead of spending 1 on playing Magic Trick.
I mean, he could have spent 1 and dealt 3, but...
Whoa. All right, Dennis, chill.
Bunnyhoppor. This has been one of the standards I've seen with Edwin Van Cleef with this particular style of rogue deck in the matchup is 4/4 is going to be enough to start pressuring, so you better do it.
Yeah, it just fits the curve as well. He has 3 3-drops in his hand, so likely that he's going to end up coining one of those and then curve out into a second one and then into a 4-drop. And if he's going to coin one of them, it seems the most effective one to coin in that scenario, the one that gains the most upside from that coin, is currently Edwin Van Cleef.
The bigger one.
Yes.
Bigger typically equals better. I like when Viper gets a draw that conflicts directly with what he was about to do when he had no other decisions otherwise, and then he has to stop and think. Because you get those decisions where he sits back and he looks around and he wonders. And he's like, what does go wrong if I do this one instead? Oh yeah, all of those things. Arcane Intellect it is. And we heard this talk in interviews the other day about Walk the Plank and what it provides in the matchup. And, you know, I think that just in terms of a 1-for-1 answer, it's not necessarily the best thing you can do, but what it does is it puts fear inside of Viper that he can't just plop a mountain giant down because Walk the Plank is there.
Yes. Whether or not the balance is right between how much players start respecting that card being in hand for the opponent. Like, I'm very much of the mentality that if I feel like Plop a Mountain Giant is my best turn, I will just play it and make them have it. Because oftentimes they don't. I certainly don't know how often they're keeping that card in their mulligan when they could be mulliganing for more aggressive stuff.
Right.
So it's something that you definitely have to look at. But it's interesting because the go-to sideboard for Mage is Betrayal and Walk the Plank and Fairy Dragon. And Betrayal and Walk the Plank are both just oddly imperfect against what Mage wants to do ideally, which is drop a big minion, Conjurers Call it. If they just have 2 big minions on board, Betrayal only kills one of them. Walk the Plank only kills one of them. So you're not solving the problem. You're kind of just, you know, putting a Band-Aid over a gaping wound from the way I look at it.
It's a good point.
I just want to play things and hit them.
I'm kind of looking at this Arcane Keysmith, and I'm wondering how this changes Bunnyhoppor sequencing. You know, I'm looking at the fact that I don't really have a straight-up way to answer Mountain Giant, and so Mirror Entity is one of the thoughts that pops into my head of things you want to do.
Viper looking very perturbed with his previous turn. I will confess I was looking at Admirable, was not paying particular attention to his turn.
Well, his turn was just kind of bad. Magic Trick and then play a 3-cost card. The 3-cost card
So
didn't affect board really, and your Giant was going to be castable anyway. It was just, I mean, this is just a bad turn. Nothing he could do about it. I mean, he could have evocationed out a Giant. But again, we just talked about Walk the Plank. I think if he evocations a Giant and runs into Walk the Plank, he just straight up loses the game. Mark of Nature. Bootleg Cold Blood.
I was gonna say, Admirable, immediately. Pick the one that does damage. Pick the one that does damage.
And it's in the middle.
Flame Strike, huh?
Yeah, it's later down the road. I mean, this game is likely to go another few turns, and I could see Flame Strike having some pretty massive implications around the turn 7 mark.
Yep.
Thinking like Giant Conjurer's Calling, for instance.
Yep. Vendetta plus Flame Strike deals the 8 that he might need to in that scenario. It also kind of prevents a late game scenario where Viper might look to use mirror images as a defensive option. Just blitz those away, push through. Lots of things that can come up.
Evocation to make hand space, use Arcane Intellect to draw cards, and you're about to see the rare 1-cost Mountain Giant.
Whew.
Now, if he really just wanted to style on him, he could make it the rare 0-cost Mountain Giant.
I don't think I've ever played a 1-cost Mountain Giant before. Because even when you reduce it to 1, it's 0 when you draw it. Like when you play Luna's Pocket Galaxy.
Look at that.
Boom.
He wants to secure it in play and make Bunnyhoppor accomplish an objective. He wants to kill it. And indeed he can. He had the ways before, but that's about as clean as you're going to get.
Yep. Really interesting, though. It very much crystallizes the debate. And, you know, I want to be very clear before I start that I'm not suggesting that, you know, Viper absolutely should have evocated out his Giant earlier in the game. But it really does make that point clear, right? The longer you wait, the more scared you are of the card being there, the more likely it is then to be there.
Yeah, I think he had a lot of justifications for waiting, though. And the big one, obviously,
absolutely agree.
Just specifically Conjurer's Calling. The two of those in tandem is what you're looking for.
Yep.
He didn't find that, and so now he has to take a risk. He can also find Mana Cyclone turns. He can find Sorcerer's Apprentice turns. His hand got pigeonholed into this play, and so now he's getting punished for that tech choice.
Yeah, I think it's just a lesson for the people at home. Like, as a general concept, if you are so scared of your opponent having a card that you refuse to put them in situations where they have to use it, you are just giving them more time to then have that card.
Yeah, you have to have a reason to be scared or a reason to hold it.
Yep.
If you can't think of both of those, plop it. Make him have it. That's lethal damage, and so we're going to game 3.
Nice and easy for Bunnyhoppor. You see the Fairy Dragon coming into hand late, but it was really just that Walk the Plank that made things super easy for Bunny in that situation.
Just a strong curve as well.
Yep, didn't have to have any kind of worry about the Giant coming down because the Walk the Plank was there, but you saw him, again, very similar to what he was doing in the first game, coming up with contingency plans for dealing with Conjurer's Calling Giants boards. For when he didn't have that Walk the Plank, you saw him holding on to his Vendetta, you saw him pick a Flame Strike, which is a removal card, even though he's playing a very aggressive matchup. And even though his most aggressive cards in the Fairy Dragon that he's adding did not come into play, it was just a fairly simple coin 3 into 3 into 4 curve, and all of those minions were still alive at the end of the game.
And one of the big things I look at is the Fairy Dragon coming in. It serves a big purpose when you're going first as well. When Mage has coin, they become a much scarier deck. And so you want to duplicate that effect of having the coin 3 into a 3-drop. Fairy Dragon's 3 on the front end, so when you're going first, a 2-drop that your opponent cannot handle with spells very much duplicates that effect. You get aggression underway and a single removal spell, keeping your opponent in a position where plopping the big minion doesn't necessarily work, means that you have an aggressive game plan that can simply end before they stabilize.
Yeah, and I think that is, I was making the argument earlier about just putting more aggression in your deck and not worrying too much about answers, but in a weird way, aggression and answers actually pair together quite well, because by getting an aggressive board up early, you are then making your opponent even more scared of the idea of just plopping a Mountain Giant into play, right? Because if you haven't had those aggressive cards like Fairy Dragon come down early, and they think, well, okay, I can play a Mountain Giant here, and if they have the Walk the Plank, I'm just going to take 5 or 6 more damage. No big deal. If you've had that Fairy Dragon early curve and you've got 9, 10, 12 damage on the board by the time they get to play a Mountain Giant, suddenly your removal card that you've put in your deck to back that up then becomes even more scary because they have to take the risk of taking 12 additional damage if they go down that line.
Yeah. And that to me spells exactly why Cold Blood was nerfed. Because that damage would add up extremely quickly versus just about anything.
You can't put Cold Blood on a Fairy Dragon, though.
That's a true story.
Feels bad, man.
But you can play it with a Walk the Plank. A lot of times pretty cleanly. Either way, the Fairy Dragon serves the purpose of compounding the aggression, so the removal is effective. And I think that is pretty much the perfect pairing, The only reason you don't have those in the main deck is because of how poor Walk the Plank is in a general card.
Yeah.
If you're facing only mages, sure, stick in some Fairy Dragons and stick in some Walk the Planks, but for me, it's like pretty much just mech hunters.
Yeah, it's interesting to me from a design philosophy perspective that like Assassinate is a card that's never been good enough to see play, and instead of making a similar effective card but a mana cheaper, they make a conditional card that's a mana cheaper, which then seems to follow the same power curve of just not being good enough to see play, right? So I think it's nice to see formats like Specialist because it introduces the idea that those cards do have a purpose, and just in a vanilla power vacuum, if it's not good enough to see play, doesn't mean that you can't find a spot for it. There are cards where like, well, yeah, if all I played was this matchup, absolutely I would play this card. Specialist creates that dynamic.
Indeed. So that roll of the coin once again reversed, and so Bunnyhoppor unlikely to be keeping Edwin in this hand. I think with Evil Miscreant. I'm actually curious about Evil Miscreant's power in this matchup. I feel like I've been losing a lot when I play Evil Miscreant against Mage.
I was about to jump in with that exact point. I think Evil Miscreant is actually a fairly weak card in the matchup. Particularly, just looking quickly, Viper has remained on primary yet again, so he does still have the 2 copies of Sea Giant in his deck, which is another reason why Evil Miscreant is a downside, because not only does it not represent good pressure, which is what you want, I just explained at length that entire dynamic. If you've just played Evil Miscreant and a couple of lackeys, your opponent is not scared to just slam a Mountain Giant into that, because you're only threatening to push 3 damage back at them. But on top of that, the Evil Miscreant plus just a couple of lackeys board just ends up playing into your opponent's Sea Giant, which is one of the ways they can explode back into the game against you. So you can see Bunnyhoppor thinking along very much the same lines, throws that card away, looks for some pressure instead.
Love the play. So many times in my head, I've just auto-kept that card.
Same.
Just for whatever reason, it just occurred to me, too. I was like looking at Bunnyhoppor's hand, just watching the previous 2 games. I was like, wait a minute, this isn't good when you're going first.
Well, as always, I'm a few weeks ahead of you. I stopped doing that a little while ago, but
you know what?
But it was definitely a realization that it was definitely an aha moment, right? Because Evil Miscreant is just such an incredibly powerful card, and particularly when you listen to people talk about the game, they just continuously talk about how nuts this card is and how it's the best card in the deck. Sometimes it isn't, and this matchup is one of those cases.
Bunnyhoppor is just drawing backstabs constantly. Like, it's a card that's pretty important to the deck, but in this matchup, that's like one of the few cards that you really could do without seeing the entire game.
He through
many
very smart engineering, found a way to make them very powerful in that first game. Though.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I was really impressed with his usage of Backstab this game, where he's been super patient with it. I feel like oftentimes in a matchup where... okay. Bunnyhoppor and zero-cost cards that aren't very effective. Name a more iconic duo in this set. I feel like when my cards aren't very strong in the matchup, what I tend to do is actually waste them in that regard. Because they're not very strong in the matchup, I'm like, I can finally get a use out of it.
Oof.
That one I'm not so sure he's sad about. I think you'd like to have a better minion this turn, but
Yes.
I think you have a very secure generic aggression plan right now.
What does generic aggression mean, Admirable?
You play a minion and you start attacking.
So
What's your
many
opponent going to do to contest you? They have to have spells to do that, and that's really the one thing that Cyclone Mage lacks is
Right.
spells that deal with situations rather than delay situations.
So just to make the counterpoint, I think if you have a hand like this sometimes, which is just reactionary and not particularly aggressive, yes, you know, you deal a bit of damage, they play a Mountain Giant, you deal with it, you deal a little bit more damage. Eventually, given time, Cyclone Mage will create a board that no cards in your opponent's deck can deal with, because that's just what the deck does. So the key objective, I think, is always to prevent giving them the time to do that. I think aggression is a little better at doing that than removal, although I do understand having a balance of both is important for maximum win rate against the deck. But, you know, double walk the plank this early, I think is a little bit of overkill. I think he definitely would have preferred a more aggressive minion in that position.
A little surprised he's not swinging with the dagger.
It's a good point. Elaborate.
Well, if you swing with the dagger, right now you have 3 mana to play. The really only things that are changing that are Evil Miscreant, Snip Snap, Henchclan Burglar. It's stuff that you're going to play as minions instead.
What if your opponent plays their Mountain Giant on the first turn that they've been available to do so, and you have to spend 4 mana on Walk the Plank?
Then I'm attacking with my dagger again.
Really?
I want to deal as much damage as possible.
Really?
You're talking to Damage Man here. Like, this is
I
pretty
know.
much all I do.
This is almost exactly the scenario I was talking about earlier with like the pinging your own giant and you'd find a way to justify it. So you would value pushing 2 damage over 2 turns over having the flexibility of just having a dagger equipped on turn 6.
I guess my question is, like, what's the dagger doing in the matchup?
1 damage.
When?
Sometimes.
And what happens when you float 2 extra mana at some point?
When you float 2 extra mana?
Yeah, later down the road and you've saved your dagger. Like, that's not always going to happen. Like, again, we're getting to that point. We talked about this earlier this week,
And
too.
I think that is also a good argument for there is a good chance that Bunnyhoppor's hand still, even if he does have to walk the plank this turn, then on turn 6 or turn 7 just runs out of things to do because it's a very airy hand right now.
Right.
I think
And
that's
so-
definitely a good argument.
So that's something to look at. Is just I know it's very minute, and he'll probably will secure this damage at some point.
Yeah.
But if he continues to fill up his curve, that swing becomes less important. I think if he doesn't continue to fill up his curve, it's different. And so here, you see a payoff of it. The
Mirror images.
consideration for exactly mirror images, this will allow him to push that damage later on.
Yeah.
So if he ends up not floating mana, this turns out to be better. So that's where the trade-off comes in. I'm satisfied now with the hold.
Okay.
I still would have swung, but I'm satisfied with the hold.
I'm glad that we had that debate in full once because I do believe that people talk
What to
way
do,
too adamantly
what
about
to
how that was
do.
definitely missed damage by not swinging that dagger that turn, or the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Or the inverse. I think it's very hard to know that for sure based on a lot of panouts over a lot of games.
Definitely agree.
I wonder.
The Viper wants to begin handling the pressure and then find a way to get to that power creation or a card that makes his turn even better. And so that's really his board objective right now, is how does he most efficiently begin fighting off the board presence.
Yeah, the other thing he might be long-term planning towards is the idea of just getting an Antonidas down on the board now that he's seen 1 walk the plank. That is, if he can safely spend 7 on Antonidas, then that might be something that he's looking for as well.
Singular banana, hit you for 1. Protect it from the dagger to buy some more time. That opens Bunnyhoppor with the backstab at SI7 agent. And has a fairy dragon. So filling up the curve.
Yeah, based on Bunny's play in the previous game, where he really did not feel the need to backstab 2/2s, I wonder whether he'll just use the Elemental Evocation as his combo activator anyway, and just hold on to the backstab for later.
Ah, so you're just gonna use the health on your minion to run over the 1/2?
I don't know, because I don't think I would have seen the play of holding on the backstab in game 1 that Bunnyhoppor made. I think my brain would have just went, that's a 2/2, I'm going to backstab it.
Yeah, I guess the difference was in game 1 he has no access to walk the plank,
Right.
so he needs utility access.
That's true. That is a big thing that does change it.
And then in this game he has the walk the plank, and he needs to start pushing damage given the Leroy is in hand. Like his game plan is kill you with Leroy.
And also, I think it's a big difference that it's a Banana Buffoon, because I think previously it was Mana Cyclones. And if there's a Banana Buffoon on the board, that means there's bananas in the hand. So 2/2 turns into 3/3, much cheaper if they just have to put one banana on it than have to ping your minion alongside a 2/2. I think that changes the equation a lot as well.
And the dagger swing got there, yay!
Yeah, I mean, the way this one game has panned out, it seems Bunnyhoppor's dagger usage has worked out perfectly.
Yeah, it's the first dagger swing forced a banana on Viper's side,
Yep.
and then second dagger swing ends up chipping face.
Yep.
He's so good. Like, it's little tiny technical things like that that help you win games where otherwise they could have been tough, or you might have needed to get lucky. Like, those little technical things help reduce the moments where you might need a bit of good fortune instead. It's so hard to point to those and be like, that's the play that won the game. But honestly, if you take a game in total and sit down with an expert and hear them talk about it for 45 minutes, breaking down that one turn, a lot of times they can find how that made the big impact. Card games are weird.
And hard.
Yeah.
Really hard.
Just strangely difficult. Like, why is it that difficult? I guess by virtue of the fact that someone can talk about it at length.
Yeah, it's just variables piled on top of variables until it just becomes too much of a matrix of information for the human brain to get around.
Yeah. It's like when Doc is explaining Mr. Fusion to Marty in Back to the Future.
Why are we talking? How have we talked about Back to the Future twice in 2 days?
You don't think I engineer that?
We don't reveal the fact that we engineer anything admirable.
Well, I don't tell you that I'm doing that.
Okay, yeah.
I just do it in my own head.
Yeah.
I actively look for opportunities, a la Bunnyhoppor, searching for an opportunity to use a dagger correctly.
Round of applause. That was beautiful. Well done.
I'm gonna be the only one here who claps. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Tough crowd.
Yeah.
Tough turn, by the way.
All our crew are just looking at Admirable like, no, that was terrible. What are you doing?
Don't judge me.
So anytime you are playing against Mage and they Frost Nova you in a situation like this where they did not play a minion alongside it or make any kind of board progress or set up some kind of combo turn to follow it up, that is a win for you. It's maybe very frustrating that you don't get to attack with your minions, but you have sucked a Frost Nova out of their hand without them using it for any benefit, really. And that is a huge win for you.
I do wonder if Bunnyhoppor is ever considering the heavy expenditure to get the Leroy to attack and have it on board. If he's considering it, the second thing he's going to consider is this the best time for it?
Again, 2 Waggle Picks, 2 Shadow Steps in his deck that can really provide big upside for that Leroy later on.
Yeah. So I guess my question is just, can his situation be bad enough that Viper's setting up a big enough turn where you feel like the disruption from Leroy is beneficial?
Yeah. But also, I think, if you just had a Leroy in your deck there, I think you absolutely play it that turn. Just to spend your mana, you get your Leroy done. But when there's additional upside in your deck to combine with that Leroy Jenkins, it still might very well get better later on.
Yeah. Kind of the story for me is that Bunnyhoppor is making the best of a mediocre situation.
Yes. Very mediocre this game, I would say. Very mediocre? What does that even mean?
It means it's precise. It's more precise to the middle ground. Is the way I interpret it.
Sure, yeah, okay. Yeah, let's go with that.
It's like you picture about average, and you're like, what does that mean? That could be above or below. Like when you say very mediocre, I'm picturing it directly in the middle of all of your draws.
Yeah, sorry, allow me to be accurate with my language. What I wanted to clarify is I would say it was actually below mediocre, the way his pan out has gone this game.
Waggle pick.
It may have just reached mediocre again.
I think it's above it now, personally.
I think you might be right.
Like the draws, that's the thing, is the draws that enhance Leroy, they always feel so impactful when they show up, where it's like this Leroy by itself, you're like, ah, this is a dead card. A Waggle Pick shows up and you're like, oh, I have a Leroy!
Yeah.
You start doing a happy dance.
Right. Yeah, I think Leroy is one of the highest potential cards to have in your hand at any point in Rogue. I don't think anyone is sad carrying the dead card of Leroy in their hand for multiple turns because it makes so many other draws in your deck live when you pick them up.
Now, the problem is he cannot guarantee that Leroy comes back.
Nope.
And so with Leroy, 2 swings of Waggle Pick, and Fairy Dragon.
Do you know what's really dumb?
That he can't target the Fairy Dragon?
Yeah.
It's a liability.
Right, yeah. Not only he can't target his own Fairy Dragon to take it off the board, his opponent can't target his Fairy Dragon, so it's hard for his opponent to remove. Therefore, his Leroy is a little bit worse because of it.
And so the thought here is, well, guess what? If Viper plays a thing and it doesn't have taunt, I can win the game.
Yep.
When Bunnyhoppor runs out of options, I have noticed that he tends to do that face that he just made where he rests his hands, or he rests his head in his hands with the hands on both sides of his head.
Right.
He often is pretty deep in thought and will take different stances on it. But it's when he's out of options I will see him do that. What else am I going to do? Kind of look.
So Power of Creation, I believe there are 30 minions available through the Discovery effect, where it's just Mage plus Neutral, and 6 of them have Taunt. Of course, one of them is Damaged Degatron, and one of them is Sunwalker, and one of them is Safeguard, all of which are insane taunts as far as taunts go. Yep, I like it. I think you're in the situation where you have to take that out.
Auger's not enough, is it? Is it? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13? I don't remember. I was total for some reason.
He's at 12.
So he's dead?
Vendetta walked the plank.
He's dead?
Yeah, he's dead. Bye-bye 1 null, bye-bye 2 nulls.
Yep, and you saw Viper's reaction.
Oh yeah, that way does it too. Makes sense.
And Bunnyhoppor takes a 2-1 victory, and so now the two of them also tied in match record. Viper moves down to 7-5. Bunnyhoppor moves up to 7-5, and you can see why we were talking about this matchup and why Viper stressed it yesterday. Very much how I would expect from these two. Identical good records.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to make exactly that same point. 2 players with, you know, almost identical, incredible records throughout Hearthstone Championship Tour over the last couple of years. 2 players who have gravitated towards each other as practice partners and friends as well because of, you know, their shared aptitude and shared philosophy on the game. So yeah, no great shock to me that they now, as we very rapidly approach the end of Season 1, are kind of gravitating towards that same incredibly good record as well.
Both German, both have animal names, both eat food. I'm running out of parallels at that point.
Well, there are many more. If we want to make incredibly shallow parallels, then we can keep going for a while. But I think,
yeah, that's the easy one.
I think we've hit most of the ones that matter.
Especially the animal names.
Oh yeah. Big deal.
A viper, a bunny. He's hopping.
What are we even talking about?
I don't know. Where have
you gone with this?
Bunnyhoppor, can you hear us?
Yep. Hello. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I wish they could hurry up that process in the interview thing so I could stop rambling on about nothing once we've said all our points very succinctly and we have nothing left to talk about. But talk to me about you this week. How you doing?
Not so great overall. But
why is that?
I want to talk about it.
Oh, okay. I understand.
Well, then I will divert the topic very quickly. You've played Rogue this week. I mentioned this a little while ago, but I was watching you stream when you were reviewing games, and you said you didn't want to review anything except Beast Hunter because that's the only deck you knew how to play. So how did you end up on Rogue?
I mean, it is the... I think I should be fairly competent on other decks as well. I think I've managed to not only play Beast Hunter, last year as well, so... But I don't know, it's my favorite deck, and I always just seem to be able to get the wins with the Beast Hunter that I don't think I'm supposed to get those, but somehow it just keeps working out. I don't know how.
What makes Beast Hunter your favorite deck?
I have just so much practice on it, and it just feels really good to me if you have a deck that, you know all the ins, you know all the outs, you know perfectly how to mulligan your deck, you know how to play it at every stage. Basically, all the decisions that you have, like macro game plan wise, you always know where you're going. You know exactly which risk to take, and that just feels really, really great being able to do that. And I don't have that on other decks in that form.
So I wanted to ask you about a specific turn as well. It's something that Admirable and I talked about, but I just want to hear it from you. There was a couple of 2/2s on the board, and you chose not to backstab either of them, and you then eventually ended up using Backstab Vendetta to be able to clear out a giant board. Was that something you were planning for long term?
I was planning on Backstab Vendetta trade. You mean when I traded in the Snip Snap, right?
Yes,
And then
yeah,
I
exactly.
daggered?
Yep.
Yeah, I never even thought about backstabbing that because I felt like I don't reduce power on board, and the spells are just way too important for me to be able to deal with his explosive turns. Backstab is just super important for Sorceress and other stuff like that. So, I mean, Snip Snap is great, right? Because it trades and you still have 2 power on board.
And so now kind of taking a look at your record in playoffs here, you move up to a pretty strong record here. How are you feeling about your next few matches? Do you feel like they're going to be tough for you, or do you feel like things are getting easier now that you're getting a better record? Like, what's going through your head on your upcoming matches?
I mean, I play against Boston and Boar, who are both, as far as I can tell, out of contention for top 3. So, I mean, that'll be an interesting one. I'll prep hard and see if I can pull out 2 more wins. Because I think if I get the 2 more wins, I can make it. Also, the nice thing is, even though I beat Vipers, theoretically, we can both still make it into top 3.
Well, all right. I'm looking forward to seeing you play next week. Bunnyhoppor, thank you very much for your time, and looking good as always on the gameplay.
Thanks.